First of all, can I ask for apologies for to propose that they received, or any questions that may arise.
Andy's happy to propose.
Andy Nash, you want to propose it? Right, okay. Seconder, Councillor Lees. Right, all in favour? Anyone against? Abstentions? Right, I thought they were fine. Thank you. Right, next, interests. Has anyone got any interest in items on the agenda tonight? No? Right, okay, move on to item 5 then, questions pursuant to Rule of Procedure number 15. We've had no questions from members with the appropriate notice, so I think we bypass that item as well. And go on to the meaty part of the agenda, which is starting with item 6, Environmental Health Service Plan 25-26, Food Hygiene, Health and Safety at Work and Animal Welfare. I think Amanda, you're going to address that one, aren't you? So you want to outline the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just introducing the report first of all. The Council has a duty to produce a yearly food plan in line with the FSA expectations. We use a template from the Food Standards Agency and we present this information in a certain format. However, we do choose to expand that a little bit and include some other activities such as health and safety. The plan reflects on the previous year, so 24-25, and demands on the service and how we've responded to that, and also looks forward into the current year in terms of 25-6. The plan includes a lot of data and information. Could be perceived as a bit of a hard read, but I hope you find it an enjoyable and informative one in terms of some of the elements that go on within just one part of environmental health. It also, for members, gives you a bit of a feel for how the sector is performing, particularly around the food sector across Derbyshire Dales, and their performance under the Food Hygiene Rating Scheme, if members are familiar with that, in terms of the scores and the performance there, but also compared to across the country, how that sector performs, and also some of the challenges that the hospitality sector faces in terms of the spend level of customers, in terms of the upkeep of premises, investment in premises, and forward planning on that, and also sourcing staff around those issues and maintaining facilities. We also provide other aspects to those sectors in terms of support and guidance, but obviously our actions are guided by risk to the public in terms of food safety. In terms of the recommendations, we're seeking approval of the plan so that we're complying with the FSA expectations, and also on the back of that approval to be able to publicise that plan, which is the expectation on the local authority. I think the other thing to flag is it also highlights some of the excellent work that's done in the commercial team under the guidance of my colleague Dave Cowley next to me here, and some of the work streams that some of them quite challenging but also inventive in terms of what we're doing on that front. As I say, the recommendations are to approve the plan and also the ability for us to publish that plan. Happy to take any questions, and Dave's here to also take those from you as well. If members have a particular passion for one particular item in there, then there's no need to actually have to go through all that here, but you're welcome to approach us as well as a service outside of the meeting, but happy to take any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Amanda. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Amanda, for the report, and everybody in your team. At 2.8, it says the service has seen a significant increase in requests for re-inspection from 13 requests last year to 41 requests for re-inspection in 2024-25. Is that? Can you give me a little bit of background on that, please?
In terms of the food hygiene rating scheme, there is the ability for the operator to request a re-inspection. So if the outcome of that inspection means their rating goes down, and they then take on board the report content and remedy those, they are able to request a re-inspection from the local authority. So it sort of goes hand in hand with some of that sort of, we've seen that slippage in some premises that maybe were higher performing in the past. We know that there's a bit of a churn about premises within our district, the seasonality, but also the ownership of those where people come out in and out of that sector. So that is available to people to do. But they obviously have to demonstrate that request by, sort of supporting information around it, because obviously that's a resource on the service to go back out to that particular premises. But where they can demonstrate that, we do bring that online as quickly as we possibly can. Because obviously there's a public-facing element to that for their food hygiene rating for people who monitor that, and that's part of their selection process of where they may choose to buy food or eat at a particular time. So they're very conscious of that sort of how things can be interpreted, which is a good thing. So that we have seen that increase in terms of that request for that level of service.
Thank you, that's nice.
Thank you, Amanda. Yes, Councillor Slack.
Thank you, Chair. Amanda, a few months ago, there was a lot of debate about businesses grading themselves and putting more stars than they got. Do you find that in the Derbyshire Dales? Has any businesses graded themselves higher than what they should be?
They can't rate themselves because clearly they'd rate themselves as 5 every time. They're only rated on the basis of an intervention by an authorised officer from the local authority.
Yeah.
Obviously, if that rating were to go down, they may be less reluctant to take a sticker down which says otherwise.
Yeah.
But that's a trading standards issue that we do raise with trading standards colleagues. But because you are misrepresenting your business.
Yeah, I'd found a great number. But graded themselves higher than what they should have been. Yeah. So can they be reprimanded for that? Or?
Well, yes. I mean that will be followed up by trading standards in terms of that. But we obviously encourage them to do so in the first instance and focus on the issues that they need to within the content of an outcome report, and then they can obviously request a re-inspection.
Thank you.
Next, Councillor G, and then Councillor Nash.
Yeah, this is slightly. I was in the reception. Was it yesterday, I think, or the day before? I'm not sure. I can't remember. But there was a young gentleman in there, and apparently he was there for an interview for your department. So I'm really pleased that you're recruiting young people, local people, into your department, and I'm glad. Hopefully, there's a good career path for them in it.
Just a quick comment, really. Yes, we've decided through our recruitment regime where we weren't able to achieve what we wanted to through a particular post, to look at an apprenticeship post. So that's a temporary post for 4 years to follow the degree pathway in conjunction with a chosen university, and also give somebody that opportunity. So they'll be in with the team setting and they'll be learning aspects on the job, but obviously that's curtailed by their competencies at that time, but then move through the 4-year programme to hopefully gain their environmental health status, and then they would have the opportunity to apply like anybody else would at that point in time. It's an exciting thing. It's new for us in environmental health. We do have graduate posts that we have anyway on a temporary basis for 18 months, but this is new territory for us, but it's not new territory across local authorities, so we have reached out and sort of taken some learning from other local authorities who've done this for probably 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and just with the impending local government reorganisation, will this pathway transfer to whatever new council? You know what I mean? Because obviously it's uncertainty there, but is there actually a proper structure for these people who are going into apprenticeships so they know that they're going to be safe to continue it if the council is reorganised?
Yes, I believe in terms of the general consensus around LGR is that the portfolio continues until such time as we have any significant change. I do think that will probably end up with some people maybe choosing to leave local government at that time, but obviously there's a greater pool of posts outside of Derbyshire Dales for that person to have an insight into. So that pathway is there for the 4 years. We're committing to that as an organisation, and taking advantage of the levy funding as well, to promote that individual. So yeah, it's exciting from our side. Brings our mean age down a little bit in our department as well, which is quite nice.
Do you say, Amanda, that these people are graduates? So they,
No, we have
sorry, not
we have a graduate scheme as well, which
Right,
we
yeah.
have 18-month contracts.
so
for-
they sort of school these at what age? 16, 18? What?
Yeah, they can be immediately from school, but
Yes.
that doesn't prohibit people who aren't immediately from school. They might be in another profession and choose to cut across,
Right,
or they may
yes.
have left school for a couple of years and maybe not know what they wanted to do, or tried something and not liked it. So we had a good cohort of sort of applications to look at.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Councillor Nash, and then Councillor
Thank you, Chair.
Franks.
Thank you, Amanda, for an interesting report. Sorry, normally I try and talk to officers before the meeting if I can ask a question like this, but can we charge for this service, and does the service cover the cost of us, and if we can, does the charge cover the cost of us providing it?
Do you mean the service as a whole, or not? There were two elements. If I respond on the two elements, the Food Standards Agency are looking at that. If you're familiar with the HSE model, then there are elements that they can charge for. It isn't something that's cut across into environmental health and food safety at this time, but it obviously is part of the conversation at a higher level with the Food Standards Agency as to whether that would be something that will come to the fore. In terms of the food hygiene rating that we touched on earlier, some local authorities charge for that re-inspection. We haven't historically, because it's actually more detrimental, I think, in terms of just the public perception compels people to want to be better. If you're not careful, if it's £100, somebody throws £100 at you, and then they take their eye off the ball, and then they're back down there again, they throw another £100 at you. They're a bit of a yo-yo premises, which we call it. We want consistent compliance as opposed to something that isn't.
Okay, so this is a service the government requires us to provide, but don't give us any funding for, direct funding.
No comment on that.
Councillor Franks.
Thank you for the report. There's a lot of really interesting information in it. I appreciate that performance data is going to be checked every 6 months and on 6 monthly intervals and 12 monthly intervals. When I read the report, the thing that stood out in my mind was the non-compliance of over 50% of our public houses. And I was wondering if you had similar concerns about this, if there are specific reasons behind this, and what action as a council and environmental health office we can take to improve that, which is considerably below the national average.
I'll take it and then let Dave chip in, because it's sort of a lot of his report. In terms of the sector, yes, it is disappointing to see that, but if we think about the sector you're talking about, there's sort of two areas to that. There's those high-performing, high-footfall premises that are probably the flagship of the people who own it, and probably are the first at the top of the tree for investment. Whereas if you're in the back of beyond and open infrequently and have a lower footfall, you're not at the top of that tree. So I think there is an element where there's a wrestling around that, and also around staff investment generally and footfall. So we've done some consistency exercises as well, in terms of how officers interpret matters that they come across, that we're not being overzealous from that side, which isn't the case. And also we're part of the food group across Derbyshire, who obviously discuss those elements and those trends. So it is something that is not unfamiliar to us, but it's a struggling sector generally. I think just in the news this week, they're just on about the numbers of public houses that are expected to close in the next sort of 12 months. It's a considerable number. And I think also there is still the legacy of COVID in terms of what people do and what they don't do anymore, in terms of those activities that they used to do commonplace, in terms of going to a public house, and the spend level of people generally. So it all weighs up in terms of that challenge. You want to add anything else to that? You want to do the here to help thing as well?
Yeah, all I was going to say is that the demographic of our businesses in terms of pubs are more localised independent traders, but they're not part of like national chains and things like that, so that can have a bearing. And we are doing so a lot of our pubs are more independent traders, so they're not part of a larger chain like a big brewery, but they may be more tenanted, so they've got more responsibilities in terms of the structure and the facilities, and that can have a bearing sometimes. And also we are providing a Here to Help campaign. We did one in January where we had some sessions for businesses to come in and speak to us about the issues they were facing, and we are going to try and do some similar campaigns throughout the year until March. So the main thing is we're trying to support businesses by giving them the knowledge. We can't necessarily help them with structural defects or things like that. That may be, sometimes it can be the brewery, sometimes it can be the individual. It can be various different issues in terms of why that site is at a lower standard than another site. So it can be quite a complicated picture. And that was one of the reasons why we've looked at the demographic of what sectors were poorer performing than others, because if the pub sector does improve significantly, that will improve the significant data for the whole of the area. So it's that area which is more significant in that way.
Is that okay, Councillor? Very good. Any further questions? No? So I need a proposal here, I suppose, and a seconder, and then we can move into debate. Councillor Wayne's proposed, Councillor Buckler seconded.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if I may, thank you very much, and it is reassuring that we have these checks made, and it's more even reassuring when they appear on Facebook and social media, because that must focus the mind of the businesses and drag them back into line. I do question the rationale about not charging for the second visit, but I'm happy to propose the two recommendations as per the agenda item. Thank you very much.
So I just wanted to respond really to the couple of people that have called for charging to be introduced. And you know what, kind of hospitality is a really struggling sort of kind of industry kind of within the Derbyshire Dales. And what we should be looking to do is lift these kind of providers up, not look to bear down on them with more charges. We get enough of that from national government without us doing that at local government. So I would kind of certainly kind of speak up for those local traders to say that we shouldn't be thinking about putting more burden, because it will just break some of them.
Thank you, Councillor. I need to be bureaucratic as well, wouldn't it? Organising charging is always adding to the bureaucracy of a council. Yes. Councillor Murphy.
They do pay. It's called business rates, isn't it?
Any further speakers? We'll move to a vote in that case then. It's been proposed and seconded, so all in favour? Yeah, I think that looks unanimous. Thank you very much. And thank you, Amanda and David, for an excellent report. Right, moving on then to the next item, which is item 7, review of contaminated land strategy. This is environmental health again. Are you taking this, Amanda, or is it Karen?
Yeah. I'll just do a quick introduction, then I'll
very
hand
good.
over to Karen.
Okay,
In terms of the report, I think it's quite clear in terms of the origins of this. Simply put, the Part 2A of the Environmental Protection Act 1990 places a duty on local authorities to produce a strategy detailing how it will undertake its contaminated land duties. Whilst our practices and knowledge on this front and the knowledge generally in the sector has moved on hand in hand, there is a need to reflect this in our technical document, which is before you today. We've taken specialist advice to feed into that technical document, and we're seeking member approval to adopt that revision this evening, so that we can take that forwards. I would stress that our major element of control is through the planning process, given the profile of our area, and that will sort of segue into some of the provisions that are put in place in terms of that process of moving through planning. I'll hand you over to Karen, who can give you some sort of historical background as well to this aspect of work.
Good evening. Just to reiterate, this is a technical review of our current inspection strategy. It's been some time since the last review, and so it is quite urgent that we undertake this review now and have a more up-to-date strategy in place, which will also reflect how we currently deal with contaminated land, and also any updates to the legal process for contaminated land. Historically, we have looked at thousands of sites across the district that we've identified as potentially contaminated. We've run risk assessments on those sites that were identified, and as per the report, we have no what we call high risk sites or category 1 sites or category A sites. And that means that legally we haven't identified anything that would fall under the legal definition of the Part 2A process under the Environmental Protection Act, that is the contaminated land regime. So basically that means that the land that we have is not high risk. We look at something called the source of the contamination, a pathway of that contamination to a receptor, so i.e. a person, and the impact on their health. So as we stand, there are sites that probably do have high levels of contamination, but they're not having that pathway. We look at human health rather than animal health, so it's really human health we're concentrating on. So current practice is to use a planning system, which we look to make sure that if there's development in the district, we want to make sure that the land is suitable for the correct end use. So if we're looking for domestic or more vulnerable uses, we have a higher standard in those properties. So we want to make sure that any gardens, etc., meet current standards. I'm sure it's quite well known that there are quite high lead content in a lot of soil across particularly the north of Derbyshire, but most of this is naturally occurring, and it's because of the mineralisation of the geology of the area. There's then the historical lead smelting and mining, etc., that happens. So basically what we're sort of moving towards is to make sure that when a house or a hospital, school, allotment, that sort of thing comes in for a planning permission, then we want to use the planning system to have people undertake an assessment on that land, and if it's likely that there is contamination there, we then bring that property up to current standards in new development situations. And that's really how we're dealing with contaminated land, and the report then reflects this change in how we're approaching it.
Well, thank you, Karen. Are there any questions? Ms. Councillor Slack.
Karen, back in 2001, we developed the Millennium Garden. You probably recall, because David Brooks was then the Director of the Environment. And lead contamination was found on the ground, and immediately they said, stop, it'll have to be covered by a membrane, which it was, and so it was imported to cover that up. But lead contamination is quite far-reaching in our area, but especially, and animals, as you've said, have died from it in various surrounding areas. but it's generally if people go on there, you've got to be deadly safe. So I do understand that, but animals are precious as well, aren't they, really? But I do understand that people are most important, and if any site's got lead contamination where people are going to be, we've got to either stop it or cover it over as we did in them times.
Yeah, if in reply to that, we would refer any details of any animal ill health along to trade-in standards where they have the animal health team. So we would refer that through to them. In environmental health, we would deal with any human issues or risk to human health.
Thank you. Councillor G.
Yeah, in your introduction, you said that you've inspected thousands of sites. And that sounds quite a lot to me in Derbyshire Dales. Is that?
We've identified thousands of sites
Yeah.
that may be contaminated, and we've put a risk assessment on those. They won't all have been inspected, but they've all been looked at in terms of a risk assessment for the type of contamination that might be there. A lot of the sites in our area relate to historical mining and quarrying and mineral extraction. So they are in the main the vast majority of what we have in Derbyshire Dales. We also, all those sites are also on our XMAP system, so officers and planning officers have access to that, so they can put that layer on the mapping system, and so when we're dealing with planning applications, etc., or we've got queries in, we do have knowledge of where all those sites are on our mapping system.
So, I know that it mentions that there's no high-risk sites, but presumably we've got some sort of traffic light system of level of risk. I mean, is there sort of a top 100 or something if we've got thousands of sites that people need to be aware of?
No, it's a sort of a national-based risk assessment scheme. So Derbyshire. So if you were, say, in Birmingham, where there's perhaps historically, really heavy-duty industrial sites, etc., or even Pride Park at Derby was having to be extensively remediated. There's been the coal sites up in the northeast Derbyshire area and Bolsover that require a lot of remediation. But because the nature of the industry in Derbyshire Dales, most of our sites don't fall into a high category of contaminated land based on the National Risk Assessment methodology.
Thank you, Councillor Lee, sorry, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Is all the district-owned land assessed as a matter of due course, or is it only assessed when an application of some sort comes in, or do we have a log of the land that we own, that's whether it's dangerous or or not, or is it just when it's been when an application comes in?
We don't have a log of specifically for our land. Like I said, we've got all the sites identified on our XMAP system, so we know where sites potentially are. Because we've no category 1 sites or high risk sites, we are not required to do any intervention until that site is changed in some way. So, and that change then would bring somebody into contact with that contamination. So, for example, if it was a commercial site or an office site, you would have a lesser standard than if it was a domestic site. So in a domestic garden, you would want the soil of that garden to be acceptable, for example, to grow vegetables in without a high risk of contamination.
Thank you. Yeah. Councillor Wayne.
Thank you. So, what you're saying basically is where the sites are, potential sites are. What happens when a developer goes onto a site and digs up the site and then goes and translocates earth within the site that contains lead, possibly around attenuation dams, which feed into the watercourse, which feed into the main river. What action is taken then, please?
Well, we would probably contact the Environment Agency under those circumstances if it's going to affect the watercourse, because the Environment Agency would be the responsible body for that water. I guess they would be interested if it was a water supply feed or what type of aquifer it was, but it would generally be that responsibility. In terms of the sites we get involved with in planning terms, people are allowed to move earth around their sites, and say if we choose a domestic property as an example, perhaps under the driveway, etc., we wouldn't mind levels being higher than in the garden, so they may move some to where somebody won't be able to dig that earth up. But you know, the garden areas where the soft landscaping is, we would want to achieve a good standard of soil quality.
If I may, Chair, because there are a number of sites, I'm sure in Ashbourne, certainly in Matlock, that, well, one brownfield site that's being looked at currently, one that's going through an inquiry, and I'm aware that there is significant lead in places up on the Wolds, and the developer was going to put the soil around the attenuation basins. Now, to me, that soil, who checks that that soil is clear of lead? And because at the end of the day, I don't think there aren't any checks done after, and that's what concerning me greatly. And I would hope that it's not probably, I would sincerely hope that if you knew that they were being put at the side of attenuation basins, you did get in touch with the Environment Agency as a matter of some urgency. Thank you.
So most large sites like that will employ a contaminated land consultant, and that consultant will be responsible for writing, you know, investigating that site, writing a phase 1 and phase 2 assessment. Phase 1 is the desk-based assessment, phase 2 is an intrusive assessment. If that intrusive assessment comes up with some sources of pollution from where they've taken samples, then he will then go on, most likely to produce a remediation plan. That plan should detail where the soil goes, particularly soil that may have contamination in. So yes, we would look at that. And then at the end of the process, when things have been completed, we would expect that a validation report would come in. That validation report should have soil sampling data in to make sure that the soil they've put in certain places actually meets the requirements.
If I may, final one, promise. So that report is done by a consultant that's employed by the developer. And then presumably it's somebody employed by the developer who's going to formulate something that's sent through to you. So who checks that has been done properly?
Well, the consultant will, you know, has to meet certain standards, and he, you know, we'll have to have certain certifications and insurances, because if he doesn't actually do things correctly, then the actual financial burden on him can be quite extensive. So it is absolutely the responsibility of that consultant to be completely above board.
Okay, thanks very much. Cheers.
At the pre-meeting, I mentioned the situation with Corder Quarry in Matlock, which probably Councillor Slack and Councillor Wayne would be aware of being unauthorised, facing unauthorised tipping in the past. And there are all sorts of stories from elderly residents about the sorts of things that went on there. And I can remember my early days in Matlock that the site was almost open to access from any unscrupulous developer or waste dealer, whatever, to dump all sorts of rubbish in there, and allegedly lorry bodies buried in there. And you notice from the first two planning applications, or the first two stages of that development, that's all built on bedrock, more or less, but and the present one now, the current application, is also in the upper echelons of the quarry, whereas the remaining deeper areas of the site, which will be future phases, have had all sorts of things, all sorts of industries and businesses there, And in the past, I can remember quite a few incidents where people were injured, children particularly, messing about, you might say, on a former business site. And there's also a triple SI, geological triple SI, which is a very deep pond, in fact, which is used by anglers. But children have, in this sort of weather, have been swimming there, and all sorts of. So I wonder about that site. I mean, that would, to me, that would be a category, a high risk category of contaminated land. We don't know what's actually buried there yet, because it's obviously all been naturally regenerated by. In fact, it looks almost like a forest from our side, from Matlock Bank, looking across. But of course, as soon as the developers start investigating that, it's going to change its character completely. And I think there's going to be high risk there, potentially. And no doubt there are other quarry sites in Derbyshire Dales where the same may apply. So I just wonder how that will be tackled in terms of planning in future years.
Again, it'll be dealt with through the planning system, so this strategy is aiming to make sure that the planning system can be strengthened in order to make sure that when sites come in, we can address any contaminated land issues.
Thank you. Councillor Slack.
Is it a regulation that every site has to have this done before? Because there's lots of sites where not been done whatsoever.
So the change we're looking to make is to make sure that sites that are that all sites maybe for domestic and any vulnerable uses, so allotments, hospitals, schools, playgrounds, that sort of thing, will all have a phase one contaminated land report submitted at the validation stage of a planning application, so that we can make sure at that point that contamination has been looked at and can be addressed.
Thank you, that's very good, yeah, thank you.
Any further questions? Would someone like to move the recommendation? Okay, so this Councillor Butler, seconded by Councillor Slack. Would you like to say anything, Councillor?
No, I don't think so. It's been very clearly set out. Thanks very much.
Councillor Slack, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, just that I'm fully supportive of this, and it's a step in the right direction. As past we've neglected some areas probably, but this is the way to go. Thank you.
Would other members like to contribute to the debate at all? No? We can move to a vote in that case then. All in favour? I think that's unanimous. So, thank you very much. And thank you, Amanda and Karen, for all that information you've given. An excellent report. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to the next item then. Item 8, sports facilities assessment. Or sports facilities playing pitch and open spaces assessment, in fact. Request for additional budgetary provision. I think Mark Hayes is going to take that on.
Thank you, Chair. I think members, you'll see that it's a fairly straightforward and fairly sort of self-evident report that we're presenting to you this evening. In essence, we're looking to commission some consultants to do some work on looking at our open space requirements for the future, not just as part of the local plan process, but also as part of our function as a sport and recreation community development activities. We did some initial sort of assessment with the consultants that may well be interested in doing the work, and the budget that we originally set aside in the local plan reserve wasn't sufficient for that particular amount, or wasn't sufficient, so we're coming to you this evening to ask for an additional amount of £35,000 to ensure that we've got sufficient to be able to cover the costs of doing this particular piece of work. We've set out in the appendix the specification, the timescales for doing this, and it's an important part of the work with our evidence base for the local plan. And if members approve it tonight, then hopefully we can initiate the procurement process tomorrow morning. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Councillor Archer, first.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question about exactly what we'll be getting for money. So when we say we're getting a report from from consultants. So will it just be a list, so I can audit a list of everything we've got, everything we own? Will it be rag rated in terms of what work needs doing, upgrade needs doing, cost of certain pieces of work? Will it go as far as actually identifying areas which are in greater need of things such as artificial pitches and that sort of thing, because of population concentrations where they might not be? So just a little bit more detail on what we can expect in terms of what they actually produce and how useful that will be, how much analysis will be in it, rather than just like a list of what we actually own and what we've got.
Right.
Councillor Archer must have read the brief pretty well, because that essentially is what we will be getting out of the consultants. It will be an assessment of individual sites across the district, and that will enable us to look at the quality. It will also ensure that we'll need to address whether or not we've got the right quantity of sites, and clearly, as the local plan progresses, we need to be assessing what that might mean in terms of changing residential development and populations. It'll also be looking at things like, sports club formation rates and what that will do in terms of impact on sports facilities. So all of those sorts of things will be part of the outcome and output of this particular project.
Thank you. Councillor Butler, then Councillor Slack.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a question for Mike or for Barbara. So report 6, there is report 6 of tonight's papers. There's a section which is entitled Climate Change and Biodiversity Implications. Report 7, there's a section titled Climate Change Implications, and report 8, the section is called Climate Change Implications as well. So the biodiversity implications of the contaminated land thing and the biodiversity implications of the open spaces report haven't been considered in the formation of the report. And obviously there are potentially biodiversity implications from this because of the amount of land that we own and manage, and we should be considering the biodiversity implications of land off-site of sports pitches when we come up with stuff like this, and that's not included in this report. So it's whether we can make sure, one of the things that we committed to in the plan for nature, one of the things that we committed to, one of the things that we've got to do as part of our biodiversity duty is to make sure that nature is considered in these sort of decisions, and currently that doesn't appear to be the case. Is that the case?
Mike, can you answer that?
Makes that a question.
Yeah, I think what Councillor Butler has identified in some respects is a sort of a template issue with regards to the formatting of the reports. You're right to raise the issue around the consistency across the 3 reports that you've got this evening. In essence, we are due and obliged to look at our biodiversity implications as part of the work that we do under the public sector biodiversity duties you're aware of. And I think we need to sort of just probably fine tune that when we're looking at future reports. Any biodiversity implications from this particular report will be addressed as part of the local plan as a whole. So if there are any specific biodiversity implications from specific elements, we will address them through the local plan as a whole.
Can I just come back to Barbara, because this isn't the first time that we've had this where our biodiversity responsibilities haven't been included in reports that have happened, and it is a priority for us as a council. So it'd be really good to make sure that we resolve the templates so that is the case, and not only that we've got the templates that do it, but that actually people are doing the assessments that we need them to do.
Yeah,
I think that's a good point, Councillor, and I can certainly make that point to those who are coming on doing this job following me. I'll send them a note tonight.
Councillor Slack and then Councillor Nash.
Thank you, Chair. We're still in questions yet, are we, Chair?
Yes, we are.
Right, the question is, there's lots and lots of sites in my ward, especially in my ward, which need attention. Will you be looking at all council assets and playing fields and so forth?
Yes, Councillor Slack.
Yeah, right. I am supportive of this, but I'll come back in debate. Yeah, thank you.
Right, Councillor Nash.
Thanks. My question's in three parts. And the first one is just a clarification question. Can someone say what BSF-PPS stands for? It's in relation to the basis of Sport England's planning for sport guidance. It comes up 4 times and I can't find a definition anywhere.
It's built sports facilities and something else.
You won't find it in the document,
Playing
Mike.
pit strategy. Yeah, built sports facilities and playing pit strategy.
Brilliant. Several times it's come up this evening and it's been a very much concentration on council land. Can I just confirm that it's going to look at all the facilities across Derbyshire Dales?
Yes, it will. So it will look at things like private sports clubs, cricket clubs, those sorts of things. So they will look at those and engage with those.
And parish council land?
Yes.
And that if we do, subject to the local plan, if we do a development plan on the back of it, will those parish council sites be involved as well? Because quite often in the north of the constituency where I live, we get a bit left behind because all the money goes into the council sites.
I can't say how the National Park will deal with the outcomes of this.
They're only the planning authority, though. They won't be. They're only the planning authority. They won't be responsible for implementing any.
A development plan. So if there are elements within this that identify specific needs and specific areas that are covered by the National Park, then the National Park will have to pick that up as part of their local plan process.
Okay. I might come back on that when the local plan comes back. But yeah, thanks.
Is that it now, Councillor Nash? Yes. Councillor Butcher. Moving round anti-clockwise, I think.
Sorry, is that okay for me to speak? Following on that, I wanted to check what the actions are likely to follow from this. So clearly it goes in the local plan, but surely there are other things the council might want to do sports development in terms of taking action. So on Councillor Nash's point, even if it isn't easy to get it into the local plan for the Peak Park, it could still be something that sports development might well want to consider taking forward. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, Councillor Butcher. This is a jointly commissioned piece of work, so it's jointly commissioned between ourselves as the Planning Authority and the Community Development Team, and it will feed into actions within both areas. So the local plan, it will provide an underpinning evidence base for the local plan, and then we can then develop appropriate standards within the local plan for new development and the requirements for provision of open space, etc., as part of new developments. But it will also, as you quite rightly pointed out, it will also mean that we can identify what are the priorities, where are the priorities for the community development team to focus their investment on in terms of sport and recreation facilities.
Thanks, Chair. Just one quick follow-up question, if I can.
Okay. Yeah.
Will that report come back to this committee?
It will do, yes. Or another committee.
Well,
it will come back to council at some point, yes.
Councillor G. Or Councillor Hobson.
I've just been trying to work up in my head whether this is a question or a comment, but I'm slightly perplexed as to why the council needs to spend £70,000 on employing a consultant to what is basically carry out the district council's built sports facilities, playing pitch and open spaces assessment. I mean, you've got 34 councillors. Councillor Slack's pointed out there's some frailties in sporting pitches there. I mean, can't we do this ourselves? I mean, haven't we got capable officers to be able to... I mean, I'm fully in favour of improving sports facilities. I'm enamoured that there possibly might be something like that happening in Bakewell. But, I mean, we already know where the sites are. We're perfectly capable of understanding there's tennis courts in all these parks, there's some in Bakewell that need improvement, there's cricket pitches. You know, we all know this. Why do we have to pay £70,000 to somebody to come in from the outside to tell us what we already know?
Right.
I think the main reason that the council seeks to employ consultants is where it feels that it hasn't necessarily got the resources within the authority to do that, or it hasn't necessarily got the whole of its expertise to be able to undertake the work that's required. And Councillor D, you'll know from the work that you've been involved in through the local plan subcommittee in the past, there is quite a considerable amount of detailed work that needs to be done that consultancy can add value to what the local authority, both officer level and at member level, can actually know as a sort of a baseline piece of work themselves. So it's really for those two reasons, the expertise and the fact that we've got limited resources to do so. We could employ our own members of staff to do that, but there's a time element associated with that, and by employing consultants we can get them on the ground and get them up and running very quickly.
Councillor Hobson.
Thank you, Chair. It's almost similar to what Councillor G said. You know, we've got a lot of expertise with our ward councillors and our county councillors. Will these consultants be directly getting in touch with parish and town councils? I mean, I'm sure we've all got examples of marvellous facilities that have been done with not much money, like at Northwood Lane. They've got all this wild species. They've worked really hard, to do that. And, I think I'd rather see that £70,000 going to do something in a playground. But I do understand where you're coming from.
Just to answer the question about engagement with the town and parish councils, the simple answer to that is yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but I need to declare an interest because I am one of the trustees of Cavendish Field Sports Association, and if you're going to be looking at things like that, it's a non-pecuniary, it's just a trustee, I don't get paid anything, so and basically I welcome that it's being assessed and all the things around the district are being assessed. It disturbs me to some tune the amount of money that we're throwing at it. How many people have we actually, consultants have we actually contacted, for quotes? Is it 3?
We have used the firms that are on the Sport England framework, those that have got the necessary qualifications experience to get onto that particular framework. And I understand, I think there's about, I think it's 3, but there may be up to 6 that are on that framework.
And they've all been approached to give the best, to get the best value. Yeah, because, I mean, to me, certainly with Cavendish, the Football Foundation have got all the information and they know how many pitches are up there, and it's just a case of tapping on. I mean, Becky knows the situation around there, and she knows many of the areas. It just seems an obscene amount of money to be paying from our community to have that work done.
I will say, Councillor Wayne, that the cost of this particular exercise is significantly more than when we previously undertook it. And part of the reason that we're here tonight is that in putting together the budget for this, we completely underestimated it in comparison to what it's coming out with. So, every authority is looking to do this. There are a limited number of consultants undertaking this particular piece of work. So, you don't need, you know, it's a demand and supply issue with regards to that
So
side of things.
it's not Brexit or Ukraine excuses or anything like that. It's gone up so much then. It just seems a heck of a lot of money. But I'll have to go with it because it's, you know, it's needed. But I do hope that... Oh, there was one more thing, if I may, Chair. The Peak District National Park. Now, if they did... I don't know whether they can get Section 106 funding, but a lot of this for development and for these sort of sports facilities comes through Section 106, does it not?
By and large, within the planning authority area, yes, they will do.
Yeah.
Clearly, within the national park area, they will need to set the standards within their own local plan and then administer that. And generally, you know, the on-site facilities or the upgrade of facilities close by will be something that they'll need to liaise with our sports and development people about in terms of how they go about delivering that, and then Section 106 agreements would be the way in which that would go forward. For larger facilities, then that may well be much more of an engagement and a role for us as an authority in terms of the securing of funding and partnership working. Things like we've done, you know, on the pavilion at Ashbourne, for example, where, you know, funding has come from a number of different sources to allow us to bring those things together. And that sort of model is the way in which that we'd like it to work on those bigger pieces of kit, if you like, that come out of this.
So presumably the finished report will be conveyed to the National Park Authority as well, will it?
Yeah, it's going to cover the whole of the authority area. The whole of the local authority area, yes.
That's right. Councillor Dees.
Thank you, Chair. How far do sort of Sports England go into providing the information that we require? And, you know, and the Football Foundation, you know, it's certainly been talked to in Ashbourne that they realise that we haven't got enough football pitches. So, you know, why isn't that information from them authorities that's telling us that we haven't got enough already without having a consultant, basically?
The way in which, you know, Sports England set the sort of parameters for this particular piece of work, that's endorsed by the government in terms of the approach we need to take to fill into and feed into the local plan. But each of the governing bodies will have information which is vital and important to feed into this particular process. So, you know, the engagement will take place with the Football Foundation, the local county football FA, the rugby union, the hockey association, and also, you know, the individual, the cricket board as well. So each of those governing bodies will have an opportunity to feed into this process. But there will also be the need to look at individual sites on a site-by-site basis to assess them, to sort of see, you know, how good the provision is across the Derbyshire Dales as well.
Yeah, so basically then we need these consultants because we haven't got enough manpower to do it ourselves and follow it right through.
Yeah, and go back to the point I made about, you know, it's twofold. It's threefold in some ways. One, it's about the expertise within the authority. Two, it's the resources within the authority, and three, it's the time constraints as well.
Councillor Hobson, then we return to the anti-clockwise.
Thank you. It actually says open spaces as well. Yeah. So would that cover something like Farley Wood, which is a community sort of asset for walking? Would that be included as well?
Those sorts of features are included within are included in the specification. Yes.
Right, Councillor Franks.
A lot of the new estates that have been built in the area recently have playgrounds or play equipment, which is managed by a management company at the cost of local residents. Now, I think it's quite variable how these are maintained, to what standard and what they actually provide. Will the consultants be looking into all of these new facilities which are managed by management companies?
I think what the consultants won't be doing is looking at the sort of specific management arrangements on individual sites. They'll be essentially looking at the quality and quantity of those facilities. They won't necessarily be looking at, because we're not asking them to look at that, we're purely asking them to say, what's the quality like, what's the quantity like, and how does that fit relative to the needs of the area. We won't be looking and asking them to do an audit, for example, of how the management company looks after and manages and maintains that. Some of that will actually be self-evident when they go and look on site, because they'll be able to see the extent to which some of those facilities actually have been maintained, but we're not asking them to do that.
Can I just ask a follow-up on that? I understand what Councillor Franks is saying, really. I just wonder whether the developers who are providing these play facilities on new developments, or they actually consult with the council about the range of equipment that they're providing and how it's to be maintained.
As you'll know, Chair, by and large, the provision of play equipment and open space as part of new development will be subject to something which, as a planning authority, we impose as a condition or as part of a condition on a planning application, or as part of an agreement under Section 106. And by and large, what we normally do is, where there's a requirement for them to engage on that, they will submit a scheme which we will sign off as a planning authority as part of the submission of planning application.
So would Becky Cummings and her team be involved in that then, in terms of advising whether the equipment that's proposed is adequate or whatever?
The Sport and Recreation team are engaged in that process, yes.
Right, okay, thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Slack?
Thank you, Chair. It's ironical. Last week I was asked by residents to go and look at a football pitch in my ward about this time last week, and I went to look at the football pitch, and the lads and girls were playing there, and probably 3/4 of the pitch, only about 20% of it was grass, 3/4 of it was soil. Fortunately, it's dry at the moment, and they could play on it, but when it rains, of course, they'll be muddy and horrible. And this pitch has been there since the houses were built a long while ago. All the council houses around it were built a long while ago. It's a junior pitch, and it really needs relaying. It's probably been there 30, 40 years, and it's been played on, the goalmars and like that, hollowed out, and it needs resurfacing, renewing completely. So this is the sort of thing which you're looking for, is it might, to target these what badly needed, where it's badly needed.
Absolutely, because as a part of the assessment, they will look at the quality of those particular facilities,
yeah,
and rate those and assess those and provide some feedback to the council.
Also on another issue, sorry to go on. Also on another issue, part of Wordsworth Cricket Ground, Wordsworth Cricket Ground and Recreation Ground under trusteeship, so they will get the same advantages as what the district ground will. Or will they not?
There will be an assessment done, as I said before, of both the assets which the council own and also the private sector assets.
Yes, yeah.
You know, what we won't be necessarily doing is investing, unless we see some benefit in doing so, into those private sector ones. But you know, clearly where we have an asset, we will look into sort of see where we need to prioritise the work.
These two issues at Recreation Ground, Cricket Ground, are not for profit. They're not a private company like Lloyd's or anything. The community, and they put a lot into it themselves, put money into it themselves, whatever they can by fundraising. So they are a good asset for the community, and they need supporting as you're going to do. So thank you, and I will support this.
Right. Back to the first of all, Councillor Butler, and then Councillor Butcher.
Yeah, sorry to it may feel like labouring the point. Councillor Hobson brought up Farley Woods, and thinking about green infrastructure and Natural England's green infrastructure standards. Is that a separate thing? Is that a separate part of the local plan evidence gathering stuff? Because obviously accessible public open space, which isn't playing fields, it needs to be considered in this as well. And so making sure that the consultants look at the local nature recovery strategy as part of this is I would really like to see from a green infrastructure point of view.
I think the work on green infrastructure, Councillor Buckler, is going to be separate to this. This is more sort of, by and large, the sort of built, if you like, built facilities, but there is elements of open space within it. But in terms of the contribution to green infrastructure, that would be something we dealt with separately.
Okay, if that's the end of questions. Councillor Butcher, sorry, I forgot. Yeah.
I think everyone wants to go.
I was going to propose that we move the motion, move the recommendation, propose the motion. I'm happy to do that if you would like me to.
Okay, Councillor Archer.
I'll be happy to, if we're at that stage, I'm happy to second or move wherever we're at. I'm a seconding or moving. I'm happy either way.
Okay.
So just whichever I'm doing, I'd just like to sort of say a couple of things. I think my initial reaction was it does look a little bit expensive, but then I think actually the debate around the room or the questions has illustrated why we actually need to spend this money, because it's actually very complicated. There's lots of different bodies involved: Sports England, private clubs, us, parish councils. You've also got different councils around the room. If we try to do it in-house, we'll be trying to promote their own areas, and it could become a little bit localised and so on. I think actually what we really do need is a independent, objective, specialist, expert consultancy to make proper recommendations that are going to go into our local plan, which we can then trust to develop our own policy. Now I'm going to do my own localism bit now. It'd be amazing if it doesn't say Ashpool needs a 3G pitch, and I'm very much hoping it does, but I will leave it to the experts. I'll put a bit of money on it, I reckon they will. I think we do need this. It is a bit more than we'd like to spend. That's why this report's here, but we need it for all the reasons I've just laid out, and therefore I hope we can all support it and get behind it, and it will ultimately result in better sports facilities and open spaces for our residents. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, I was going to call Councillor Archer to propose this, so if you want to second it, Councillor Butcher instead. Okay, thank you. So it's been proposed.
I'm very happy to second it, but I would also like to speak, if that's all right.
Yeah, yes, we can speak. Yes, I was going to ask for contributions to debate.
Right. Okay, in a very similar spirit to Councillor Archer, I'm disappointed if it costs more because of the competition with other councils. That's frustrating. But I do see it needing more work than simply looking at sites we already know about. So in Bakewell, there's been a long-standing demand for better facilities. The recreation ground is extremely well used and excessively used, really. And the football teams are getting actually really rather good, and certainly the first team really needs more substantial facilities. So something looking at the demand, which means talking to more people than simply the ones we immediately think of, and trying to reach out to the communities to find out just how might those who are less fit or less able to engage in sport or don't engage in sport as much now can do so. So I think it does need a broad view, and I mean, I'd be surprised if 70,000 was enough to cover it all, actually, but certainly they could do a substantial amount, and that would be really valuable for the districts as a whole, not simply for the local plan, important as that is. So yeah, I would certainly want to move that we spend this money on that.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So it's proposed and seconded. Councillor Wayne.
I think, reflecting on it, it's one of the things that obviously we've got the money and it's going to benefit our community. And we were saying this at the council a while back about spending money on things that, the money that we've got, spending it on something that's going to be of benefit. My only concern, well, it's a hope, or is it a concern, is that after we've spent all this money, the developers and the funds and the development of the sports facilities takes place. Because that is my main concern, that we will spend this money and the improvements won't take place. And I think hopefully some of us may be around at the time, in a couple of years' time maybe. But I just sincerely hope that we can reap the benefits, and I think I'll be supporting it. But thank you.
So, I mean, I'd like to echo kind of Steve's comments there, but I think there's also a challenge for us as a council, because this sort of audit, while it's about things beyond council facilities, is going to be a big focus on our own facilities, and it's probably going to send some home truths to us. And I can think of a certain bandstand in Matlock Beff at the moment, which has absolutely fallen apart, and facilities kind of all over all of our wards, which are not in the right state. So I think the bigger question for us all to have a think about when this report comes back is how do we rise to that challenge to start correcting some of that and making a difference in our communities, because this report on its own will not make a jot of difference to improving things unless we've got a commitment to do it.
Yeah, I'm sorry I can't support this because, I mean, this is just paying £70,000 to ask somebody to give you a shopping list. We have a corporate plan. Whoever's running the council, they look down at it. They've got so much money available for improving facilities. We don't need somebody to tell us where the facilities need improving or pay them for it. That's all the recommendation is, to spend £70,000 on a shopping list. And it's whether you've got the money in your credit card, your bank account to pay for all the things you want. All the councillors have mentioned, I mean, you're better off giving Councillor Slack the money to buy some turf from Talbot Turf to put on his football pitch, because we know that the facilities need improving. Everybody knows already, and this is not going to achieve anything. It'll make you feel better, I suppose, but I'm not going to support it because I just think it's unnecessary. I think the council knows where those facilities need improving. Have you got the money to do it? We have a corporate plan. You've done all these parts, you've made a nice job of that. Hopefully some more will come in the future. There's a limited amount of money available, but there's no shortage of list of projects that we can come up with ourselves without having to pay somebody to tell us about it.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to say, really, that I'm sure we're all in agreement that our open spaces, our playing fields, our pitches, and our nature in that environment is vitally important and must be looked after. And, you know, we've all spoken about where they've been. You know, Rose has got a terrible little playground with nothing in it. Baslow aspire on the sports field to have a running track. We should be thinking positively and, you know, improving our facilities. And, you know, I'd really hope that some money can go. We'll all be fighting for our own areas, but it is for the benefit of the Dales.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying that if you're looking for this, there's probably not going to be enough money to pay for everything that everybody wants through Section 106 funding, and so we need to be able to go to the National Lottery Heritage Fund, the National Lottery Community Fund. What you need to do in order to secure money from them is have evidence that what you're talking about is right. And what this piece of work will do is provide the evidence to say this is what needs doing in this sort of place. So this actually potentially unlocks a significant amount of money from external funding. It's an investment that we are making to say this is what the problem is, this is what the issue is, and then you can get it's all right having a shopping list. If you've got the first thing that an external funder will say to you is, so what? So what? How many sites have you got? What's the issue across the? What's your strategy across the district? Unless you have that sort of background information, nobody's going to fund it.
Yes, I quite agree, Councillor Butler. That's a very good point. Any further, Councillor Lees?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Some good debate. I'm going to support this because I feel quite embarrassed at times, and Councillor Archer will probably back me up on this one. In Ashbourne, we've got loads of teams that actually play sport in a different county. We should be supporting them, and by doing this, supporting this motion, we should get somewhere, hopefully.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further contributions, or can we move to a vote? Okay, then, it's been proposed and seconded, so all in favour of the recommendation. That's unanimous apart from, well, it's I'm going to say NEMCOM, but are you against? Against, right. So 1 against and everyone else in favour, I think. So it's therefore carried substantially. Thank you very much. We've got a small matter now of the outstanding minutes from the previous meeting, the Ashbourne Reborn hostile vehicle mitigation item. So I think, do we just have to...
No, we need a resolution to exclude the press and public and turn the
Yeah,
webcast.
okay, yes, that's right. Yes, it was supposed to be a resolution to exclude the press and public, so someone wants to propose that, even though there's nobody here. Yes, Councillor Lees. Councillor Butcher, thank you. Right, goodbye, folks.
Turn the webcast on.
Sorry?
Is it off?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, have a vote.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
right, all in favour? Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Right, do now.
Right, does someone want to propose this then? Sorry?
There's no one watching now, Gareth.
No.